Hi, it's Roland from Practical Plastic. Welcome to part 3 and the final part of the Revell London Bus build. So, without further ado, I'm going to hop into this. As usual, just want to say thank you for watching, subscribing. Please do like, share, alert, all that good YouTube stuff. And let's get this guy finished. Alrighty. Okay, so let's get started putting some pieces together. Now, there's going to be a lot going on with the assembly, so I'm not going to talk through everything. But here I'm just putting in a little piece, and now I'm looking for a little piece. Even though it's a bus and there are a lot of sizable pieces in this kit, there are some small detail pieces like that little crank. And so a little time crawling around the floor. Now here, putting in some of the railing for the steps. This piece, interestingly enough, the instructions don't tell you to put this in until you have the lower level roof and the upper level floor in place, making those access points, those location points, very difficult to get to, as you'll see momentarily here, attaching the roof. And you can see with that on, getting to that railing piece, not going to be easy. So I jumped ahead and put it in. So as always, study your instructions. And now what you'll see here is I'm basically compressing the structure to get everything to dry together, and I have some tape there to hold it in place. And this again is using layers of pieces to make the overall structure true. And here you'll see I did some scraping and generous amount of glue, because this, for the upper level, the interior and the floor with the other interior card here, will make for a nice rigid, well, it's not quite a box because it doesn't have a top or two of the sides, but it'll hold it together. Now, with that in place, let's talk about a little fabrication. So my thought here was to add a map to that front interior card on the upper level. So where am I going to get a map? And how am I going to print it? So I Googled London bus routes, clicked on the images, and just looked at map images. I like this one because the good contrast on the colors. It's not too complicated because, as you see, you have to shrink it down. So click on the image to open it up. Now I'm going to right click on the image, copy it, and I'm going to copy it into a blank Word file, or LibreOffice in this case that I use. The reason I do it in Word is I can then use the ruling bars on the side of the file to properly scale my image. I already measured the space I have on that interior card, so now I know just how small I have to print the document. And here, by shrinking the window, this just allows me to get the image right next to that measurement bar, so I can see exactly how big the print is going to be. And a little adjustment on the size there. And once that's done, I'm just going to send it to my photo printer and print it out. Now, I'm intending this to be a little display map in the bus. So, and there you see my photo printer, my trusty Canon, and out it comes, and there we go. So yes, it is small because it's 1/24 scale, but I'm going to cut that out. And now from my spare parts box, I'm going to pick that clear piece, and now this strip styrene to frame it. Now you can see I already have some area cleared out. This was my third choice in stock styrene for framing it, but experimentation, sometimes you just got to live and learn. So that I did. So now finishing out the framing and locating these pieces. And checking with the map to make sure it will fit. A little black to cover up and act as an undercoat. Flat black, that is. And now using the same Atom Carmine color, which I used for the interior cards. That was then ready to accept the clear parts. And you see those go on. And now we have a little display case. Now that messy glue line there, I'm just going to cover that up with a little paint and another strip of styrene. Like so. And there we go. That's going to be all tidied up. And now some clear coat, which is just the floor polish. You'll see me using this throughout the build. And with everything done, can slide the map in, and there you go. I think that's a nice little detail to add what is a very bland piece. And there we go. That's all in place. And taping this to make sure everything bonds up right and I don't have a big gap. Now here, these are the mud flaps. I didn't put them in when they were originally called out in the instructions because the wheels were not on yet, and I was afraid I'd just keep breaking them off. So I zoomed ahead and forgot to put them on. So have to double back and do that. So now removing the tape, everything, you see the gaps are gone. So we're looking good. And now I'm going to come in, and again, generous amount of glue here because it's very important this gets a nice solid seam. Now here I use the side panels of the bus to properly locate the floors respective to each other because these side panels have these big locators which, lock in to the upper and lower levels. And now that the upper interior is done, it's chair time. And lots of chairs, once again. But as with the lower level, these just sight and locate, pretty easily. Of course, it is a, long, tedious step getting all that decaling and assembly done for the chairs. But hey, it's a bus. It's part of the turf. And here we go with another railing piece. I did have some concerns how well these were going to locate and fit, but I have to say they went in and they really were not a problem at all, other than what is unavoidable, which is working with odd-shaped pieces in cramped areas. Now here, you notice in the instructions it says to clip part of this upright bar. So just measuring that and cutting it before mounting that seat in the bus. So now getting into some decals. Now along the side here, and they tell you this in the instructions, there are excess lengths on the chair locator pins to the side. So you just have to clip those off so that the exterior side panels of the bus go all the way in against the interior panels of the bus interior. And now doing some detail painting for this interior back piece. Now here, this is a mirror that is supposed to mount along the top of the stairs. And they give you just a kind of grayish silver decal, but I decided instead to use some of this mirrored tape to outline and fit a piece of mirrored tape in there. So now it's actually mirrored, just like I did with the mirror at the bottom of the stairs. And there we go. And now here, just using some of my clear part cement to simulate what would be a lens over that mirror. And a little semi-gloss black, doing the wheel well detail here. And now adding the lenses, signal indicator, headlights. These parts fit very tight, the headlight lenses. Almost could have snap fit them. Now, what you're going to see here, attaching the decal for the front grille and the license plate. And I ran into something here where the grille decal was a little bit bigger, and I added too much mark fit, and some of the decal was ruined. So what am I going to do? And likewise, the license plate decal, after I added the mark fit, it must have shifted and I didn't notice it. So now that is crooked. So first thing I'm going to do is trim off that excess decal. And I got to figure something out for those damaged spots. So first I'll just go with some flat black and cover them up. Now, that big blotch, I'm going to use spare parts and decals. So first I'm going to use this piece, prime it with some black, clean up around that license plate decal a little bit because I think it should be salvageable. Touch up some of the red paint around the decal removal. Now you'll see what I'm going to do here. So this piece from my spare parts, I primed it with black. Going to cover it with a little bit of gold. Now, how to mount a part over a decal. Regular part cement will melt the decal. Same with the crazy glue, the super glue. Don't want to use that. Mr. S or Tamiya, Mr. Cement or Tamiya Extra Thin would seep out around the decal and ruin it, but the Tesla's clear parts will not because it's basically almost like a silicone glue. So I know I can put that on there, it'll hold the piece, and it won't ruin the decal. Now there is a pin on the back of this part from my spare parts box, so I'm going to use that as a solid locator. Now the London buses were in service for just over 50 years. So I'm cutting out those numbers and I'm going to make myself a little placard. So the part I have painted and prepped, I will now mount in there. Now that my dull coat on the grill is dry, so I have a little mounting spot, and from that decal sheet I took out a 5 and a 0. So now this looks like a memorial plaque for 50 years of bus service. Now getting to these windows, lots of these little injector lugs. All 3 sprues, piles and piles of them. So, not sure why all those were there, but, you know, just something to keep in mind. Lots of cleanup. Here just doing assorted prep painting and detailing. Silver around the windshield frames. Red marker for the taillights. Turn signal amber for the signal lights. And then mounting those parts in. These dropped right into place. Fit was great. Now doing the detail paint on the wheel wells for the bus side. Now for the decals, I am doing this flat white undercoat just so that the decal will be nice and crisp in terms of its color and not tinted by the red underneath. And going in with a marker just to detail up this grill on the front. Now, it is optional to drill all these locator holes, but I wanted the extra detail for the pieces that will attach there. Could use a hand drill, but it's a lot of holes, so I went for the power drill and just knocked them out because it's a bunch of holes, as you saw on the instructions. And a little cleanup with the X-Acto knife, and there we go. Holes, holes, and more holes. Now with that done, I painted some red around the base and some black on the pieces that show through the floor card, gray around the windows, and the areas that are still in the original gray plastic, that's all gluing area. And glue it I will, because this is the final shot to trim up and make the whole assembly true because of those giant locator rectangles. So those will lock in, and since I use these pieces to sight the upper to lower floor, I already know those will lock in without a problem. And here just removing the extra length on some of those chair frame lugs, and now putting in this side as well. And it does fit in there rather securely. And with those in place, now it can start going around and adding the other exterior panels. Oddly enough, in the instructions, they do not tell you which ones to locate first. But when you look at the parts, it's clear which pieces have under ledges and which pieces have over ledges. So the pieces with the over ledges are the ones you assemble afterwards. The two big side panels have the under ledges, so they have to go on first. And I was just pointing there, you can use the trim on the pieces to make sure things are sighted. There is an interior piece for the front upper level cowl. So just going to get that mounted in there. And here I'm just showing, you really want to make sure, because it's a thin margin that is your gluing area, that you have that all scraped off so you can get a good seam. And here I'm using my Tester's liquid cement because it gives me a little more working time. And they do fit in there just so. So it does take a little finesse to get it in place, but once they're in, they're in, and I was happy about that. And now for the last exterior piece, this rear cowl, and that just slides over, and again, in place it goes. Okay, so here we go. The exterior panels are all attached. The moment of truth, of course, was how these things were going to line up, given that some of the parts were a little warped and wavy coming out of the box. But fortunately, with the way I approached the build, it seems like I think I did a fairly good job of getting it to true up. Now, that said, fairly good was not a full correction of things. And now with all the different exterior panels on, cemented in place and dried, I do have, some clear gaps in the panel seams. But what I wanted to stop and show was this is not a disaster, because as evident as they were on that side, on this side I have already corrected them, and you can see it's really a minor defect that goes away with really very little effort. And all I did here was I used my little friend here, my tester's clear parts cement, and I just ran a thin bead into these panel gaps, let it dry overnight. It dries clear. So then I went back with the same Atom red that I used to airbrush the body panels, and just with my fine brush painted that in. And with it dry, now you can see it really just makes those gaps blend away, which is kind of what you want. So I'm pretty happy that is working out as it is. Now, that said, despite all the test fitting and mock-ups and everything I did to make sure I had painted everything I needed to paint, there are still things that are going to need touch-up, and that's no big deal. Expected that, but I just find it interesting how things can surprise you. So taking a look right down here, this whole edge, I missed that. And you can see in here this white line of edge, the end of this exterior panel. So I have to fix that seam. So of course, those things will just need some touch-up paint. Looking underneath, I remembered to do the sills for the side panel, but forgot for that back panel. So you see that white there. I'll have to take care of that. I did pop in the hood. It was really tricky getting in there and snapping in the pins for the hood hinge, but that's why I didn't put it on camera, because there was no way I was getting my hands and a little screwdriver to push on that outer pin to get it to snap in and be able to get the camera in there to film. So that's done, and that's all good. And when it's all said and done, there is still a nice view of that engine in there. So we are moving right along. The big red beast here is really starting to take shape, and it's pretty exciting. So here, just showing what I described in filling the gaps. So here's putting in the tester's clear parts cement. And now going back with the Atom Paints red that I used for the airbrushing to paint over the glue I laid in there, the clear parts cement that I laid in there. And that's it. Seam is gone. And now the Tamiya flat yellow that I used, likewise on that portion of the gap. And here, touching up the paint along the top of the side rail. This is where the roof will sit. And getting into the exterior detail work. Now, one thing with these decals, I don't know why, but all of the decals are a little bit bigger than their spaces. So you're going to see here, some of these just don't fit, and I have to go back and cut them. Now, once I ran into this here, I did keep it in the back of my mind, but you know, it's very hard to gauge if a decal is going to fit into a recessed space. So this will come back and surprise me once again later on. Now getting into the clear parts. You know, again, clear parts are super clear, which is wonderful. And also their location in their along their sills, they're spot on. I mean, they basically snap in, which is great, except for one window, which went in rather tight, and you'll see later how that went. Now you see with my eyeglass cloth, I like to clean each window before putting it in so that I get the fingerprints off from the inside of the window. The outside, I don't worry about so much. I can get that at any point. But inside the window, not so easy. So just want to make sure that's cleaned off before it goes in and I can't get to it later. And some more detail spots. And here doing a little bit of detail paint for the little step. A little panel liner because there is like a step grate by the driver's door. So just laying that in there. Get a little detail work. And now back to the windows. Now here for the side, these are all the repetitive windows. And it's a bunch. So they're all in now. Cleaning them off. And then the vent windows have to go over. And now they're on. All right, so here we go. Lots getting done, which is good because we're getting near the end. Very exciting. So as you can see, did all the windows. Not my best work, I have to say, putting some of these windows in. To get some glue in places I didn't want it between these outer window pieces and the, I guess they're supposed to be fold down vent windows, and the actual windows themselves. And this side, the windows went in very tight. Actually got a crack in one, so I put a decal over it to try to cover that up. But happy to say the clear parts almost like click into place. The fit is really good. Down here, it was, like I said, tighter than I expected, and maybe should have test fitted a little bit better, but all the others had popped right in, so I figured these would too. And it's a little late when you got glue on the part and you know you're ready to mount the window. So be that as it may, but part fit again working out really well. You can see I've done some of the little decals around the bus, so only at this point the large decals remain. And I just waited on those because there is still quite a bit of handling here and, you know, moving the bus around, and I really want to wait to the end to put the larger decals on just so that I do not damage them. So that is that. Now, talking about decals, on the bus we have these very large placard decals that go on both sides. Now I'm using this side. This is the smaller one because, of course, on the other side we have this wonderful Easter Island or Rapa Nui head here. A lot to have on camera, so I'll explain what I'm going to do with the smaller one for this side. Now, you saw during the build montage drilling out all these holes, and that is for these framing brackets, which after test fitting, thank God, they do pop in there just perfect, which is good news. Otherwise I would have had a meltdown here having to fix all that. Anyway, so what I noticed in the little bit of research I was doing is that these placards that they had on the side of the bus, these were not, or at least did not appear to be painted down. They appear to be either a canvas, I guess in the older days, maybe a vinyl banner in newer times, but they are smooth and basically flat in reflectivity. So these were not, or at least, like I said, from what I've seen, they do not appear to be painted onto the bus. So when I was looking at how I go about applying these, just laying the decal across and then using Mark Fit setting solution to get the decal to shrink down along all these frame members that are raised on the outside of the bus. I thought, one, that's going to be tricky, and two, it actually is not really representing the way this would have looked. So tried to think how I could do this, keeping the decal smooth without having to remove the raised member details on the side of the bus, because obviously the real bus, those members would still be there. So what I did, my plan, I got some very thin sheet styrene. This is 0.5 millimeter thickness. So out of the bag, it's like this, and as you can see, very thin stuff, very flexible, because the side of the bus does have a very slight wave to it, and if the plastic was too thick, one, it would look a little ridiculous with the decal on there. But I want to make sure when I mount that it's very easy to get it to settle along the contour of the bus. And then what I did with the decal cut out, I just marked where this will sit. That gave me the areas where I had to remove paint to mount that plastic backing, sheet styrene plastic backing, once the decal is on there. And the only thing I really had to remove were the raised rivet heads along these vertical framing members. So the raised detail is still there. So what I'm going to do is use the decal to cut out just enough sheet styrene to mount the decal. I'll mount the decal on there, and then that will go on the side of the bus, and all these framing brackets here can go on there as well. These are pretty delicate, and unfortunately in the kit a bunch of them are not just warped, they have a wave in them. So I did try to straighten one out and I broke it. Good job me. But not a tragedy, because this, nope, still don't have it right. There we go. So this snaps in, and they do basically mount flush to the bus. So I can put that in there, and then I can mend that with a little glue. Smooth that break out and a little glue, and that will be fixed up just fine. So a little basic repair stuff. So that's where we're at. All the windows are done. Yay. Because it's a lot of windows, and just me personally, for my building, you know, I don't know if I'm a klutz or what, but I always dread getting that fingerprint or, you know, glue fingerprint on a piece of clear, and basically avoided that here. But like I said, these double layer panes did get some errant glue in there to clear part cement. So it is what it is. It's not a tragedy. It's not like a big horrendous thing. So I'm not going to worry about it. So gonna get going with this, get those decals mounted, and aside from doing the final roof piece, it's home stretch time. So gonna get back to it, and we'll get this guy wrapped up for the final reveal. Alrighty. Now for mounting these frames, because it's small locations and I wanted them on to stay on, I used CA glue. It did fog some of the paint that I had on there, which caught me by surprise because I didn't have any problem with fogging with the Adam paint previously, but what can you do? So now here, getting ready to do the cutout for the plastic sheet. So just marking the corners. Get my handy dandy ruler. And this is just, basic craft work here. Draw some lines. Gonna cut this out. And because it's 1/2 millimeter sheet, it cuts nice and easy, so no problem there. Now checking for the decal, make sure it overlays well. Going back and touching up. And ready to mount that plastic piece. Now, this was supposed to be one decal. I didn't realize the backing film was very limited, which is great because it makes the decal neater when it's done, but it did break. Now, when you do a big decal, this is classic big decal technique. Get one end started, hold it, and just slide the backing out, and it'll settle right down on the surface, especially since I have that plastic sheet. It's nice and smooth, and on it goes. Now getting back to some detail parts and going with flat clear on the decal, because like I said, this was either a canvas or a vinyl banner, it seemed, on the scene, as opposed to the side bus decal, which I do want in gloss. Now, this front, it's bugging me. So, time to fix it. The kit does come with decals for 2 different routes, so I'm not going to sweat that I'm going to use the decal for the other route on the route version that I'm doing. I want my decal straight. And I cover up one patch, go into my spare parts box. I took out a little Great Britain placard and a Coca-Cola placard. Cover up those spots. So it looks like we're having some fun with our bus. Now, give yourself a gold star if you find what I'm doing wrong here. That's right, it's on the wrong side. So, fortunately caught that while everything was still wet, so I could just take the decal off and reset it. And another little decal part. And here again on the back, I put these decals on and they're too big. So, as you see, had to remove it. Not a tragedy, just annoyance. And a quick little trim. And now it's good to go. And now I know for the one on the other side, as you see here, I'm trimming it before putting it on, so that too settles right in. And now replacing that rear bumper decal. Okay, I said I would go, next time I would talk would be final reveal, but just to get things moving and wrap this up, I just figured I'd show you what's left to be done, because putting the big placard decal and the placard frame on this side is basically the same as on the other side, which I did show. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Have a few little detail pieces for up in the cab area here, so that will be done. Have 2 roof support brackets that need to go in. They just slot in. I did have one seat where the frame piece separated, that's why that clip is on there. And then the roof itself pops on, and there's really no assembly here other than putting in a few little bulb lenses, so nothing complicated there. And then that will be it. This project will be in completion. All right, so gonna get this done, and then I'll be right back. All right, so here we go. It's final build reveal time, at long last, for Revell's 1/24th scale London bus. And there we go in all of its glory. So, I have a number of things I want to say about the kit. So, I have actually made myself a little list so I'm not stumbling through my talking points. First thing you may notice is I don't have this on my usual little turntable because it doesn't fit. It's just a little too big. So I have it on a Lazy Susan here, and I'll just be doing the spin manually. So first, I want to talk about the impression of the build. Now, the build experience now that it is all done. So in general, and I've said this during the build, part fit is really good. You're not wondering where parts go or searching around for pin locators and things like this. Everything is on spot and goes together well. That said, I commented, and I will say again, very curious thing with the decals, where the decals almost seem like they're scaled for a kit that was, let's say, like 1/23rd scale, that the kit was just a little bit bigger. So all the decals that need to sit in recessed areas, like up here, even along the placards to fit inside here, these guys on the back, in here, none of these decals fit. They're all too big. And, it was a bit of a surprise mounting some of them and realizing that, I got to take it off and trim it. As I said, it's very difficult, at least for me, to gauge the size of a decal while it's still on the sheet versus whether it's actually going to fit in its spot. So if you venture into this kit, definitely be aware that your decals you'll have to keep an eye on them. Now, as far as the actual assembly, I noted I did deviate from the assigned build sequence in the instructions in several points. And that was more me looking at the instructions and deciding that the way I build and the way I handle things, literally the way I handle things, that I'd be better off deviating from the described assembly steps. And one easy example is on the front cowl and for the rear exterior cowl as well. In the instructions, you do all the assembly on this. You put the clear parts in and all this, and then you mount it on the bus. And same with down here on the front nose of the bus. And I did not do that because in playing with the parts, doing test fits and whatnot, I realized, I'm going to have my hands all over this thing. And I was just concerned that I was going to end up with a glue thumbprint on a clear part, or that I'd be knocking the clear parts out, or worst of all, cracking a clear part, because some of these pieces, again, especially the front and rear cowl, I did need to, they fit well, but you have to work them into position, and there's twisting and this and that. And these pieces, as I noted in the very beginning of the build when I went through the open kit, there is some warp in these pieces. So you have to work them into position. And I just thought the minimal number of assembled pieces on those, the better. And then once they're in place and set, that I know they won't be getting jarred and manipulated, then I put the finished pieces on. There were another example was doing this rear step rail. In the instructions, they have you put that on after the upper floor of the bus is assembled to the bus, which means you're reaching in through here and trying to get down through the top to get in there. Not with these mitts. So I did that ahead of time. So aside from those exceptions, though, the instructions are great, no problems. I did mention in the last build video, I believe, episode of this, that you do have to watch for the decal callouts in the instructions, but they do go on pretty much in the order that they are listed on the decal sheet. So if you're putting decal 35 on and decal 9 is still on the sheet, chances are you missed it, and you'll have to go back and just dig out in the instructions where that goes on. Now, also with the assembly, since it is a bus, there's repetitive assembly. There's no way around that. I talked about 40 windows going in, and all these seats, and doing all the seat decals and the seat frames and whatnot. It is what it is. That's the subject matter. It's a bus. A bus has a lot of seats. what, what are you going to do? In a way, I as I was doing it, I kept thinking to myself, when I do one of these full interior tank kits, there are, 300 pieces or more to do all the tracks. And that is way more repetitive than 40 odd seats that are large pieces that are easy to work with, as opposed to tiny little tank track lengths of 1/35th scale that are small and fiddly and whatever. But that is what goes with building not just the bus, but any type of subject matter that has repetitive assemblies. If you're building, let's say, the battleship Iowa, it's got anti-aircraft guns, and you're going to have to build all those little emplacements and put them all on the hull. So, it just is what it is. The subject matter is the subject matter. But to the point of the assembly, you saw as I went through this, part of the reason too I deviated from instructions is coordinating the painting with the building. Obviously everything needs to be painted, right? It's a model, so you got to paint. But this was a little bit different, and I had noted earlier again that when you're doing, let's say, a tank build, right? And you build the whole interior of the tank, and it's all basically going to be, white or gray or whatever color you choose, and you can do all that building or majority of that building and then do the painting and it's done. Here, there are, and again, this is the way I built it, but even if you look at actual buses, there are a number of colors in wide areas of the bus. And really the only effective way to do that is with airbrushing, or if you're really brave, with a rattle can, because then you have to be very careful with your masking. But you do have to keep in mind that there's a lot of painting before you can do any assembly, and then you'll have to keep an eye on what you're assembling to make sure you're not going to get in the way of future painting. I did a lot of preparatory paint work before doing, big blocks of assembly, so that when it was time to assemble, my pieces were done and ready, and I could just put them together, and then it was just a matter of, touch-up paint with brushwork. So again, paint and build strategy depends on how you like to approach a model, what particularly you want to do with it in terms of a color scheme, but definitely something to keep in mind. And speaking of paint, I had mentioned this was my first go using these Atom paints, and Atom paints from Ammo. These were great. I mean, this one jar, which I think I paid $4 or $5 for, I airbrushed all the red on the bus, 2 coats, did all the brush work, and I still have a decent amount left in there. So it went on great. It covered great. And it's just, the colors are really nice. Definitely need a clear coat, whether you want to do gloss or matte or flat. But to really get the full color saturation with this, at least with this red. And I also used the Atom Carmine for the wheels and the interior sides. But great experience with that. So, what is the summary of all of this that I'm saying? It's a great build. Pieces go together great. It does take patience. This is a big project. And not just because we're talking about 370 odd parts, but, when you get into a kit like this, you're not buying something that is at a low price point. This kit does have a price tag to it. I paid 125 or so for mine. Um, the prices vary depending where you go. I bought mine in a physical hobby store, Bayshore Hobbies on Long Island. Give them a shout out. But obviously, you can get it online. But the point being, you could get like 4 car kits for the price of this one bus kit. And in terms of parts and material, yeah, it's 4 times the kit. And, you know, just to the point of, if you're going to get into something like this, it's an investment. So set your time aside, be prepared to give it the time it really deserves so that you can get the most out of it that you want to do. I put, um, from when I really started working on this, this is 3.5 months of hobby time that I have invested in this kit to get it the way I want it. Is it perfect? No, no build is perfect. I never claimed to be perfect in my builds, but it is very close to what I wanted to get to at the end, which granted is not much different than the box art, but it's basically where I want it to be because I put the time in. So that comes to the conclusion of, if you get into something like this, bigger part counts, bigger subjects, more complicated builds, color schemes, combination thereof, you have to be patient. This is not a rush job. If you're going to get into something like this, understand that it's going to be a while before it's done, and you have to have that level of patience. And that patience, I think, certainly comes with experience. The more kits you build, the more you open a box of parts, look in there and realize, wow, this is a lot. You're biting off a big project. And when I opened this box and looked at it, I had figured 2 months. It took a little bit longer, but you have to set the time aside, and you just take your time. And yes, it's a lot of time, but I always figure the upside of that is, it's really exciting when things start to come together and getting to the final point. And, this is 2 things I want to say on that. I know I'm saying a lot, but there's a lot to say. But 2 points on that. One, even though I gear this channel for people new to the hobby or returning to the hobby, I like doing a big project like this. I don't think this is appropriate for someone as a first kit. Definitely not. But I like to show this because as you go through and you're, building your skills and your experience, and you look at something like this big giant box on a hobby store shelf, or you're looking at it on a website and you see, oh man, 370 parts. You know what? This is something you work towards. And the second point of, when it's done though, when it's all finished, boy, there's a lot of pride in knowing all the work that you put into this and all the time that you spent on it, getting it to your finished product. And maybe to the greater point of satisfaction, boy, oh boy, what an incredible shelf piece this makes. My opinion, obviously, but, the unique subject matter, its relative size to things in 1/24th scale. I'll take out my little VW Rabbit measuring stick. I said in the very beginning of this, it's so much fun being able to build different size vehicles in respective scale and getting to see, how they stack up, and realizing, wow, Rabbit, okay, it's a relatively compact car, but London Bus is a big deal. Same thing when I did the AMT auto car dump truck. See the scale, no pun intended, but to see the scale of vehicles relative to each other is a really nice thing. And I think it certainly adds to the experience of the build, which brings me now to my final point of, when you look at a kit like this and you are deciding to venture into something like this, because from the first point, of course, the price point, it's expensive. There's no doubt about it. When you get into these higher part count kits, more complex kits, there's always going to be a price that goes with that. It's just, reality. But to understand that, because of that, it's a privilege to build one of these styles of kits. And, I feel privileged that I got to do this because it's not a kit you see every day. It's not something that everybody has the opportunity to do, either because of the obvious price point to get to, or simply the shelf space because it's a monster. It takes up a lot of room, or not having the room to do the assembly. I showed at one point in the build, I had stuff all over the place because of the sprues and the large size of the parts and coordinating painting and on and on. But, if you get to do this, appreciate it. Appreciate that you get the experience to build something like this, because unfortunately, or by choice, not everyone in the hobby gets to do something like this. And I would say that whether you're doing this bus or, one of these full interior detail, military vehicle kits, those are a special genre in themselves. If you're into shipbuilding, if you're doing, a model warship that's 3 feet long with, a zillion photo etch parts that need to be origamied together, these are privileges. Again, not everybody gets to do it. And realistically, you don't get to do these too many times. I am never going to build another London bus. This, I might do one pickup truck after another or a tank after another, but I built this one bus. I'm not building another bus. So this is a one-shot experience. So, I took my time with it. I got it the way, or as close to the way I wanted it. And now I have this thing going to be on my shelf, and I get to enjoy this every time I look at it. So I know that was a lot. Thank you for bearing with me through the whole build and everything else. Just as a reminder, we do have this opening hood and this lovely engine detail in there. And also, as a reminder, you do get to build 2 engines with this. So this is the Scania engine, which replaced the old Lakeland or AEC engine in there. But I wanted mine to be more like the vintage bus, so I did the old engine. That's also why I did the placard rail around the outside of the banners, because that is part of the older bus. Same with the bus warning lights. Apparently after 1992, these were flush mount instead of sticking out. And on top of that, during the build, I ran into a few snags. I made a few mistakes. I botched my grill decal here from doing too much mark fit too quickly. So, I hobbied it and I made this little 50th anniversary placard for the bus's service. And then I just threw on a EU, Great Britain decal label and a Coca-Cola label. The time I was in London, it's many years ago, but Coca-Cola signs all over the place. I guess that's the international ambassador of American culture. But there you go. And it's all set. Now, one other thing you can do, the top is removable. So, and it does come off You just have to flex this a little bit. It slides out, and then you have the open top bus, as you would see that they did in fairer weather sometimes, so that you could sit and enjoy some of that precious London sunshine. And it also, from the point of the model, with the top off, after you've done all that work on those seats, you get to see that detail. And up front, you can see that little map that I added in. So that's all nice. Once again, the underbody is not terribly detailed, but how many times are you going to be, model cars? I love looking under my model cars and seeing the detail on the underbody. I don't see myself doing that with this with any regularity. you know, it's beautiful the way it is on its sitting on its tires, and that's the way I plan on keeping it. And for the most part, I would leave the roof on to keep dust out of there, but for display purposes right now, I can leave that off. So there we go. The London Bus, like I said, I know it was a long build, longer than I expected. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with me through this whole thing. And now, hopefully you're watching this in its final appearance, because I am really happy with the way it came out and that I had the opportunity to do this build. And you know, just some of the detail in here, the stairs, it's just such a unique machine, and so happy that I got to spend my time with it. Yeah, so that wraps that up. As always, and again, thank you for watching. Please do, if you have not already, subscribe, like, alert button, all that YouTube stuff. And with all that said, I will be back with another build. Going to do something quite a bit simpler after this, but I will be back doing another build, and we'll get to take a look at that. And in the meantime, as always, enjoy your hobby. Alrighty.